Okay, Anita, I'll leave it to you whenever you want to start.
Okay. For those of you who are on, we have 183. We have a few more registered. We're going to wait one more minute before we actually start to let them get a chance to get on. Okay, our number looks pretty stable, so we probably have those who are going to be participating. Good morning. This is Anita Casey, and I welcome you to the first of 4 judicial webinars. We have set these up with regions in mind. I will introduce our State Bar President in a moment, who will give you the dates and the regions for the next 3 webinars. This one is our North Central webinar. Before we get started on the details on this one, I would like to let everyone know that even though the State Bar annual meeting did not go as planned, as everything else has not gone as planned, we will be having a swearing in of our new young lawyer and Board of Governor members and the officers of both groups Friday, June 5. You can view that. If you cannot attend, I'm sorry to tell you that, but you can view that at courtswv.gov. That's courtswv.gov. That is at 3 o'clock next Friday, June 5. With regard to today's webinar, it is 1 credit in law office management. For those of you who are sweating to get your, what people call ethics credit, remember they are not just ethics credits. There are 4 categories. Ethics is 1. Today's seminar on law office management is another. There are 2 others, elimination of bias and attorney wellness. So you can have 3 hours in any of those 4 areas. After today's webinar, our IT director, who put this together for us, will send a confirmation by email of your attendance for the 1 credit. You must accept that email in order for the credit to go on your transcript. Do not let it sit on your computer. If you do not receive it by the middle of next week, before you contact the State Bar, look in your trash, look in your spam, and see if you can find it there. After next Wednesday, if you haven't found it, you can let me know, and we will try to track it down for you. Before I introduce Monica, I want to let you know that this webinar is for credit for West Virginia only. If you are seeking credit in another state, you will need to follow their procedures. We have a very limited staff. We have limited financial resources, as you all probably are aware. We do not have the ability to either complete forms for other states or pay fees that other states assess for attendance. So I apologize, but you will need to take care of those or from the other state for yourself. Before I do anything further, I will introduce our current, she hasn't been sworn in yet, but she's been acting as our State Bar President since April, Monica Haddad.
Good morning, everyone. Glad you could join us for our first in a series of regional judicial panel presentations. I'm pleased that the State Bar has been able to host a series of COVID-19 webinars with the help of Anita, her great staff, and the members of the Board of Governors. We've had webinars on substantive areas of law, ethics, well-being, and then more recently, we began with our first judicial panel with the Supreme Court a week or so ago, once the courts were starting to reopen, to assist you all with the logistics and the questions and issues I'm sure you have and concerns about how matters are going to proceed, both physically within the courthouse and as well beyond and outside the courthouse with regards to dockets and other matters. So I'm pleased that the members of our Board of Governors especially jumped in when we came up with this idea to say, hey, the Supreme Court, that was great, but now let's do something more regional. So we set up 4 of these to sort of hit the different corners of the state and have asked various judges to participate to speak to you about how things will be handled in their courthouses, in their courtrooms. So this is the first of these judicial panel webinars. This is the North Central West Virginia webinar. If you want to make a note of the others, because I know many of you travel around the state, and I've seen many of you on this call even that are from Charleston. There will be one in the Charleston area. It's the I-64 corridor webinar on June 2 with Judges Reeder, Bloom, and Howard. We'll then have one on June 4, which is the Northern Panhandle, Judges Cuomo and Hummel. And then the last one will be the Eastern Panhandle on June 12th. Anita, maybe you can jump in. I don't have listed here who the judges are for that webinar.
Judges Carl and Lawrenson, and for the life of me this morning, I'm drawing a blank on the fourth one, who is, I know Lawrenson and Carl. I apologize. I don't know the other judge personally, but he is practicing out of Mineral County. And if I'm sure I'll remember his name, and I apologize to him now for forgetting it.
Well, it'll be in the bar blast, and hopefully you all do check your bar blast. That's something that we put out every Tuesday. Used to be about maybe 25 or 30% of you all would routinely open them. We know that. We have our statistics, but now the numbers are 70 and 80%. So we appreciate that, but we also know it's full of information. It's been that way for years. That's helpful to you all, especially now with the COVID-19 matters. So check your bar blast on Tuesday. So I'm going to introduce our moderator and our panel. Very brief introduction so that we can get to the substance. Shannon Smith is going to be moderating this judicial panel. Shannon is a member of Casto and Chaney in Morgantown, where she has practiced since 2008. She is the District 14 representative to the State Bar Board of Governors, representing the attorneys in Monongalia and Marion counties. She's also a past chair of the Young Lawyers section for the State Bar. She's going to be assisted by Sam Hess. You can't see him, but he will be fielding the questions. This is interactive, and they will explain to you how that will be happening. But Sam is our representative to the State Bar Board of Governors for the 18th Judicial Circuit, which is Preston County. He practices as a public defender for the Public Defender Corporation in Preston County, and prior to that, he was in private practice and also served as a law clerk. So on to our panel. Thank you, judges. We appreciate very much you spending time with us here today. First, we have Judge Shaffer, who was sworn in as judge in the 18th Judicial Circuit, Preston County, almost 2 years ago to the day. Prior to that time, Judge Shaffer worked as a prosecuting attorney. He was also in private practice. He is a graduate of the WVU College of Law. Interestingly, prior to that time, for 23 years, he worked in the fields of construction and as a coal miner. Judge Matish is with us from Harrison County. He has been a circuit court judge for the 15th Judicial Circuit for the past 19 years. Prior to that time, he had a general practice in Clarksburg, and he is also a graduate of the WVU College of Law. Chief Judge Debra Scudiere is Chief Judge of the 17th Judicial Circuit, which is here in Monongalia County. She serves on the Mass Litigation Panel. She is a former member of Casto and Chaney, and she practiced for 37 years prior to becoming judge. She likewise is a graduate of the WVU College of Law, and she is also a past State Bar president. So thank you, everyone. Shannon?
Thank you, Monica. Thank you to the three judges for joining us today. We're going to approach today as a bit of a roundtable. And so all of my questions will be directed to each of you. And then after a few questions, we're going to check in with Sam to see if he has any questions from the other participants or audience members. And so Sam, do you want to provide the information to everyone on this call as to the best way for them to submit a question to you?
Sure. I think the best way to do it would be to send it to my email. It's shess@pdc18.net, and I'll put that in the chat message.
Thank you, Sam. So I think we can begin, beginning with Judge Matish, who I believe is still on here, although I don't see him anymore.
I'm here.
What can we expect to encounter regarding change in the courthouse entry and procedure generally in your county?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to thank the State Bar and the attorneys involved for putting this presentation together. And on behalf of all the 3 judges that are participating here today, thank you for asking us to be a part of it. I would ask for a moment of silence at this time for all the victims of the pandemic, their families who mourn their loss, those that are recovering, their caregivers, our healthcare workers, and our leaders, that they make timely decisions to keep all of us safe. Thank you. With that having been said, I think when you come into Harrison County, it's pretty much going to be the way it's been for the last 19 years, and that is you're going to be required to go through security. What's going to be different about it is how you approach the front door. If you're coming in the front door and going to the main courthouse, you'll be required to use the handicap ramp. And when you leave, you'll be required to go down the one side steps that are there in front of the courthouse. If you're going to the annex, where the family court or voters registration or early voting is, or magistrate court, you're going to be required to go through the 3rd Street exit. They have a security system set up there. You can expect to have your temperature checked. It's kind of up in the air at this point in time as to what some of the rules are as far as questions that may be asked of you, in that they were going to require everyone coming in the building to fill out a form answering certain questions. I think that's part of the handout that I've provided to you all, but then there was a decision made that maybe that wasn't going to be done for everyone. It was only going to be done for staff and employees. I think the temperature check's still going to be done for everyone, with the exception of people that are coming in for voting. You're going to be required to maintain a 6-foot distance. You're going to be limited on how many people can be in an elevator. There's only 2 people allowed in the elevator at any given time, unless they're a family, and then the whole family unit can be on that elevator. And you're going to be required to wear a mask unless you're coming in to vote. And that was just changed yesterday after all the material was handed out. So unless you're coming in to vote, you're going to be required to wear a mask when you're in the building, and you're going to be required to maintain that 6-foot social distancing.
Thank you, Judge Matish. Judge Shaffer, what's the expectations and courthouse entry for Preston County?
Well, prior to COVID-19, we had instituted a policy wherein we required people to sign in that came into the courthouse. The reason for that was in case we had to evacuate the building in case of emergency, we knew who was in the building and who was in what offices and which courtrooms. One of our attorneys come up with a good suggestion as soon as COVID started, that instead of individuals signing in, the security people now sign them in so that we only have one person touching the pen. When they come in through, we have signs up everywhere about social distancing. Like Judge Matish said, we come up early with a set of questions. We worked with the county commission, the health department, and OEM. That we have been asking questions almost since day one. We got a thermal thermometer that we've been taking temperatures probably for the last month and a half. Upon entry, they have to check in with security. They have to let them know where they are coming to. The security will call those offices. We are only allowed 17 total people in the waiting areas of the entire courthouse. That's all 3 floors. If we have an adoption, I do permit up to 15 people that can come in, but those people do not come in the main entrance of the courthouse. We bring them in through a side door so that they are not in contact with any other person in the courthouse. The circuit clerk's office, we only permit 1 person in it. Magistrate court is permitted 2 people at their counter, 1 person at the desk for the public to research things. Probation can have 2 people, community corrections 2 people, family court can have, I think it's 4 people in their courtroom. So we've made all these changes in order to maintain the social distancing. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Shaffer. Judge Scudiere?
Most people know that we are not in the old courthouse up the street in Morgantown anymore. We are in the Justice Center at down at the end of High Street. So in our Justice Center, we have on the 3rd floor the 3 circuit courts. On the 2nd floor, we have family court and magistrate court. And then on the 1st floor, we have the prosecutor's office and the circuit clerk and probation and those types of offices. So when you come in the front, remember we used to be the old post office. So it's kind of a wide open area as you come in the front doors, and you'll be greeted right there by the bailiffs who will have on masks. And we've always had at that entrance the metal detectors to go in. So now, even before that, you will have your temperature taken, and you will have the requirement to be wearing masks. We ask that attorneys who are bringing clients in make sure that their clients are wearing masks. We have some down there that we can give out, but we would rather people come with their own already. When people go to other floors, they will get on the elevators. They will see signs that say only 2 people are allowed in the elevators at any one time. We also have limited numbers of persons in any one office, any one department in the Justice Center at any one time. Otherwise, we're taking some of the same similar precautions as the other circuits.
Thank you, Judge Scudiere. For our next question, let's start with Judge Shaffer. Are there going to be any changes in the configurations or furniture arrangements in your courtroom?
Yes, what we went through the entire seating area where the public would normally sit, and we have measured out to maintain 6 to 8 foot distance. We have the numbers on places that individuals can sit. Right now, we're able to sit 33 people in the courtroom and maintain the 6 to 8 foot social distancing. That is for the public. Once you come inside the railing, we have set up 4 different tables. At each table, we have signs that is a chair for each counsel. The parties will be sitting in behind the counsel, 6 feet apart. We do not permit any closer distance than 6 feet. Now, one thing that I do permit, because of having to make a record, in circuit courts with the court reporter, once they are inside the railing, I permit them to take their mask off if they wish to, so that we can make a good record. If someone wants to keep their mask on, as long as the court reporter can understand clearly what is being said, then I permit them to keep the mask on. But other than that, I permit people to take their mask off once they're inside the railing, where I can ensure that they are at least 6 feet apart.
Thank you. Let's move to Judge Scudiere. For your courtroom, or even the other courtrooms in Monongalia County, are there going to be changes?
What we have done in my courtroom is that we have had our maintenance department, and they've done a great job of putting in clear dividers on counsel table, so that the attorney can sit on one side of the divider and the client can sit on the other side. And we're working now on kind of how many people we are going to allow, hopefully, in the courtroom at any one time. We haven't had live hearings yet, so we're still working on that. There probably could be a few more people in my courtroom than in Judge Tucker's and Judge Cajo's, just because my courtroom is a little bit bigger.
Thank you. Judge Matish.
Well, I haven't had any hearings in the courtroom since all this got started. Everything's been done either by telephone or on Skype. But as a local newspaper likes to report all the time, I have a very tiny courtroom, and that tiny courtroom doesn't allow for much movement around of furniture. Everything's kind of set and it's in its place, and there really isn't much of an option. We have been able to mark the various benches and the chairs, and we can get about 18 people in there. But you know, it's going to be a situation where I feel that anyone that's in there, as long as a court reporter can hear them, they will be required to keep a mask on, whether they're in the gallery or whether they're in front of the bar, and especially if they're approaching the bench. You've got an awful lot of people that they like to spew those droplets when they're talking, and I don't think that taking a mask down when you're talking is necessarily what this is designed to prevent. So in all likelihood, they will be keeping a mask on as long as the court reporter can hear.
Thank you. The next question is a bit of a three-parter, and let's start with Judge Scudiere. Judge Scudiere, what kinds of remote hearings have you been conducting, meaning type of case? Part two is what kind will you continue to entertain, and then through what medium are you going to be conducting or have been conducting remote hearings, meaning Skype or Zoom or some other type of video conferencing?
Yeah, well, since the beginning of all of this back in March, Division 2 in Monongalia County, we have been doing remote hearings in most of those areas. Probably not pleas, but we've mostly been using phone conferences. And at the beginning of every phone conference, I always announce to the attorneys, you have to follow what we call in my courtroom, Rusella's Rules of Order. Rusella is my court reporter, and she has told me very specifically that we have 3 rules that they have to follow. They have to speak very clearly, very distinctly. They cannot talk on top of each other, and they have to say who they are every time they talk. So that's for telephone conferences. And amazingly, it's working very well. The attorneys are actually listening to those directions, and we are very pleased with how that's all turning out. So we're mostly using telephone conferences. When we have appearances by inmates, say from North Central Regional Jail, we can use the video system that they have, and that also is working very well. And we actually plan to continue both of those systems as we go forward. My assistant Robin and I were talking the other day, and I think that what we're going to do going forward, which is one of the questions you asked about, is give attorneys the choice as much as possible. What works for you? We have a lot of people who come into our courtroom from out of town. And so anytime that we can accommodate them by using video conferencing or telephone conferences especially, we're certainly willing and able to do that.
Thank you, Judge Scudiere. Judge Matish?
Well, before this even got started, I was a big advocate of making sure that we didn't transport prisoners unnecessarily outside of the regional jails or DOC facilities, and would conduct most of those hearings through the video conferencing equipment that had been provided to us for use by the Supreme Court. That was especially true with respect to habeases, arraignments, or any non-evidentiary hearings as was allowed under the rules. I always gave the attorneys the option of appearing by telephone, especially for scheduling conferences. But you know, since this has started, we've been doing pretty much all 3 judges, pleas, sentencings, the abuse and neglect adjudicatory hearings, dispositional hearings, motions for continuances, whatever it is that we've had scheduled, we've been trying to do it remotely under the guidelines that were given to us by the Supreme Court of Appeals. And I anticipate that we're going to continue to do that. There are so many requirements that you have to clean the courtroom between hearings, and it seems like it works to continue to do what we've been doing for the last couple of months. I think we're all, educated and comfortable in doing these hearings. So anticipate that we're going to continue to do that until we're told at some point in time that we no longer can do it.
Thank you. Judge Shaffer?
Well, I kind of agree with Judge Scudiere and Judge Matish. You know, we have been holding all kinds of hearings, plea hearings, sentencing hearings, motion hearings. We've done adjudicatory court hearings by phone for abuse and neglect. We use the video through Tiger Regional Jail. I think maybe we've only had at least, maybe one, if maybe two inmates that have been transported since this began. At the beginning of each hearing, the first thing that we do is we make sure they can see everybody in the courtroom. We identify every person in the courtroom. We then ask the person on the other side, the inmate, most generally, can you give us your Social Security, last four, your Social Security number and the date of birth to ascertain that we have the right person there. We then have the attorney speak with the party, make sure they can hear everything, and we proceed as much as possible. The only hearings that I do not permit to be telephonically or by video is my abuse and neglect preliminary hearings. I believe firmly that that's the first hearing in that process. I believe the Supreme Court's order permits us to hold them in person. And I believe that if I'm going to make the decision to take someone's child and to remove that child from the home, that they ought to be able to meet with their counsel. We have conference rooms where they can meet. We've offered our video equipment to counsel to meet with the individuals. So that is the only hearings that I require people to attend, is the preliminary hearings and abuse and neglect proceedings.
Thank you. Why don't we see if Sam has received any questions? Sam?
Thanks, Shannon. I've actually received several questions, and I'm going to try and synthesize a couple of these. To piggyback on the last question about the video hearings, I got a really good question about what kind of accommodations are the judges doing to allow communication with their clients during the video hearings. And I guess to keep with the rotation, I think I would pose this to Judge Matish first.
That's a very difficult process to accomplish, simply because you have guards that are available in the room where the Skype hearing is being conducted, because they're using a video card. They may have someone that they're not able to leave, or they don't feel comfortable. You really just have to kind of play it by ear and do the best you can. I know on occasions when we've had hearings prior to this, we had hearings in the courtroom. I would ask everybody to basically leave the courtroom and allow the defendant to remain in the courtroom with his client on the video conferencing equipment, and ask the officer to also leave and give them the opportunity. I think the key to this, though, is really preparation. Make sure you've met with and talked with your clients ahead of time before the hearing gets started. I know there are signs in my courtroom, and when I'm conducting hearings by way of Skype, I really feel like you're still in my courtroom, and you need to be dressed appropriately, not be picking up coffee cups and taking drinks. Be dressed appropriately, at least for what's being shown on the camera. And attorneys are not supposed to have their cell phones on, but yet the times are such that attorneys can, and that's probably not going to happen if the client's in jail, the attorney can be texting back and forth with their client while the hearing's going on. So that's another way of trying to handle that issue if it comes up, assuming that your client has a cell phone you can do it, without disrupting anything or causing any interference with the equipment.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Shaffer, what kind of accommodations would attorneys expect in your courtroom as far as communication with clients during video hearings?
Okay, well, thank you for that question, Sam. And as you know, Sam is a public defender in my circuit. And actually, I think the first plea hearing that we did by way of video from Tigard Regional Jail was with Mr. Hess. What I've arranged is our conference rooms have, one conference room has video accessibility. I've made that available to attorneys if they wish to come into the courthouse to speak with their clients by video, either at North Central Regional Jail or with Tigard Regional Jail. However, what I tell them is they have to make sure they schedule that with the facility, because the facilities only have a certain number of video conference rooms, and so we have to accommodate our hearings with their availability. As Mr. Hess will attest, I provide time at the beginning of the hearings for the attorneys to speak with their clients privately in the courtroom. Everybody leaves the courtroom. We have made sure that the guards leave the room up there to ensure the attorney-client confidentiality. We have also, during the hearing, during plea hearings, or even during sentencings or during motions hearings, if something comes up that the attorney needs to speak with the defendant at Tigard Regional Jail, I will actually recess the hearing and give them an opportunity to speak to the person in private. This is a constitutional right that they have of attorney-client privilege, and we will not violate that one bit.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Scudiere, what kind of procedures do you have in your courtroom?
Well, luckily we haven't had that come up too much so far. We have had one or two situations where we have broken during the hearing and allowed the attorney to speak to the client, but mostly what we've had is the attorneys and the clients have spoken ahead of time and have been pretty prepared to go forward. But I agree with my colleagues that they certainly have a constitutional right in the criminal proceedings to have access to their attorneys, and we certainly are willing to make whatever arrangements are necessary, even if it's kind of on the cuff. If something arises, we just take care of it right then.
Thank you, Judge. Shannon, I guess I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. And my next question really is in the same line. We'll start with Judge Shaffer for this one. Are there certain kinds of hearings that you would prefer to be conducted remotely? Or even alternatively, will you allow attorneys to request permission to have any kind of hearing, including abuse and neglect, remotely when higher risk participants are involved?
Well, what we do is, most of the abuse and neglect cases are court-appointed attorneys. We do that on a rotating basis. We try to keep, that schedule. Right now, what I've done is, like I said before, that's the only hearing that I require to be done in person here in the courtroom. It's the same thing down in magistrate court if you're doing a preliminary hearing where a person is charged with a felony. If that person's going to be bound over and on bond for possibly the next 6-8 months or maybe possibly a year, I think they have that right to meet with that attorney and to see that attorney and have that attorney there with them. We have taken extra precautions here in this courtroom. We have done everything to ensure that social distancing maintained. Our bailiff sanitizes every place in the courtroom where someone has been prior to in the prior hearing. And so other than the preliminary hearings for abuse and neglect, if anybody wants to appear telephonically, we do that. Now, what we have ran into is some problems where people want to maybe admit a document as an exhibit, and it's not been provided to the other side during those hearings. Or in some hearings, you might have a telephone that there's text messages on. And I actually had to recess a hearing, and it got continued a few days later because, you know, the other side has a right to see the documents that somebody's going to testify to. And so these are accommodations, as Judge Scudiere said, you have to do this on the cuff and on the fly. You know, that's the reason it's important that, number one is that attorneys, if you are going to use something as an exhibit in a hearing, that it has been provided to the other side. Because if not, the only alternative we have is to continue the hearing to another day.
Thank you, Judge Shaffer. Judge Scudiere.
Well, I agree. And as we mentioned before, we're planning on going forward with giving our attorneys as much option as possible. Honestly, I think that even beyond all of the problems that we're having now with the coronavirus, I think that this will be something that attorneys will want to take advantage of a lot more to be able to appear remotely. And I think that we're all getting a lot better at technology. We're all getting a lot better at using video conferencing and telephone conferences. And so I plan to kind of follow the lead of the attorneys who know their cases better than I do and who know what they need better than I do. And so we're actually going to try as much as possible to give them as much option as possible.
Judge Matish.
Well, under the CDC guidelines, I'm considered to be elderly, so I'd like to do all of the hearings remotely. I know that's going to be a next to impossible task when you come up with a jury trial, but nevertheless, there's really no real reason for most of the hearings that they can't be conducted remotely. One issue that we're going to have, though, like with respect to the North Central Regional Jail, we probably have somewhere between 12 to 14 judges and probably another maybe 20 or so magistrates, although that may be cut down just a tad with respect to who's on call for arraignments in those proceedings. But we probably don't have enough video equipment or the Skype cards that they're using in regional jails in order to not cause our schedules to get behind. It's been somewhat of an issue with some of the cases, but it's no different than the attorneys having to be upstairs on another floor in a hearing, and they get stuck and they can't appear on time, and you just end up having to wait. You make the best that you can under the situation, and be accommodating to everyone.
Thank you. Sam, any other questions along these lines?
I'm getting a tremendous amount of questions, and I really appreciate that. What I'm trying to do is synthesize them the best I can. And I know some of the questions, Shannon, you already have on your list, and I think we'll get to you. But one of the big questions that I'm getting is provisions for masks. And in particular, if a litigant or a witness shows up to the courthouse and they don't have a mask, do the different courthouses have provisions to try and accommodate those people and get them in so that they can either testify or show up for their hearings? Judge Scudiere, I think you're probably first on this rotation.
Yeah, and going back to what we said, masks are required, and we are really pressing our attorneys to make those arrangements for their own clients, especially we're talking probably in civil cases. But the Supreme Court has sent us some masks. Our health department has sent us some masks. We've even gone out and bought some masks. And to tell you the truth, if somebody shows up and doesn't have a mask, we'll get one.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Matish?
We will provide masks if they don't have masks. The only thing that I would ask the attorneys is be mindful of Trial Court Rule 4.07 that addresses your appearance and your obligation that you have to also advise your clients of appropriate appearance for them to come to court. We don't need to have people coming in with masks that support a particular cause or a particular purpose or agenda that they may have. I think we have the right to prohibit them if the jury trial is going on from wearing those type masks in the courtroom because of it affecting the right that the defendant has to a fair trial. But I think attorneys need to also be mindful of that. I saw an article last night that some of the N95 masks that actually has a little ventilator on them may not be appropriate because what is spewing out of your mouth or nose may end up getting through that in some manner and defeats the purpose. So having seen that article, I'll probably research that further, and if I see an attorney that doesn't or is wearing one of those masks, I'd probably ask them to put one of ours on. But you really should provide those yourself and tell your clients to provide them. But if need be and they show up, we'll get them a mask.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Shaffer, what about your courthouse?
Well, Mr. Hess, we, as my law clerk and my assistant, tell the attorneys on every scheduled hearing that it's their responsibility to ensure that they have masks and their clients have masks. However, the county health department has provided us with some masks for, in case somebody does show up without a mask. The big thing is that we have provided some masks down to the security desk because basically once, no one should be coming in the courthouse without a mask and get by security. So basically that is the #1 station that masks will be provided to individuals if they don't have them. One thing that I would like to state is that to my knowledge, I think that we've had here in the county, in all the county buildings, I think we've had 3 people that has fallen on the steps because of the mask fogging up their glasses. So this is something I would want to caution everybody about, is that the attorneys, as well as telling their clients, you have to be careful coming up the steps and down the steps. If you need to use the elevator is available, because the last thing we want is people getting hurt when they're trying to be safe in one area and cause them to get hurt in the other.
Thank you, Judge. Shannon, I guess back to you.
Thank you, Sam. This next question will begin with Judge Matish. Judge Matish, for those who are going to be representing incarcerated individuals, what responsibilities are going to fall on the attorney for scheduling video conference times with the jails, and or how much of that does the court coordinate?
As far as setting up the Skype hearings, my secretary is responsible for getting out the notices to all the attorneys involved, and of course the attorneys can, get their clients involved. Part of the issue that you have, though, is that some of them do not have internet service, and they may have to participate by phone. So that can end up, creating somewhat of a problem. When you have people that may be under the influence, it's going to be tough for you to make those calls and determinations when hearings are being conducted remotely. But the attorneys do have the obligation to either go to the jail or to contact someone at the jail if they need to try to set up a conference with video or by Skype or some other means. That would fall upon them to do that ahead of time and before the hearing. I don't think it's any different than what it would normally be if we were not in the midst of a pandemic. I think it's very, very helpful if the attorneys would start on their pleadings that they are filing to include not only their address and their bar number, but also a telephone number where they can be reached, and an email address so that those notices can get out timely to them.
Thank you. Judge Shaffer, same question.
Well, like I've said before, we've made available our conference room that has video capability to communicate with the regional jails. The big thing, Shannon, is like we've said before, the regional jails only have so many rooms up there available. And, when you're got to make it available to 4 or 5 different counties, to all the circuit courts and the magistrate courts, scheduling becomes a problem. And in relation to that, scheduling, when I was talking to you a little bit ago about the preliminary hearings for abuse and neglect, there is such a short time period between the time that an imminent danger petition is filed and that the preliminary hearing has to be held. And, when you don't have, here in Preston County, not everybody has video capability to communicate with their attorneys. Many of those abuse and neglect clients don't even have cell phones. And I don't know about Marion County, Taylor County, Mon County, and Harrison County, but here in Preston County, there's a lot of areas that we don't, that people don't even have very good internet access to even be doing this. So that is one of the things. That's the reason the conference room is available. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think any attorney has taken us up on that so far, and we've made that available since pretty well day one. So it's going to be up to the attorney if they can't speak to him by telephone at the regional jails. If they want to do it by video, they need to contact us, and we'll accommodate them any way we can.
Thank you. Judge Scudiere?
Well, assuming for a moment that we're talking about video conference hearings where the inmates appear by video conference, our practice has been for my assistant, Robin Bailey, to work ahead of time with both the jail and with counsel to coordinate those appearances. And so far, I'll have to say it's been very smooth, worked amazingly well.
Thank you. Sam, any other questions for now?
Yeah, I got a good question about the preferred medium. As far as remote hearings go, do the individual judges have a preferred medium that they like for their hearings? I'm not sure who's first on the rotation right now. I'll just throw it out to Judge Shaffer. I mean, a video conference or Zoom or Skype or telephone? Is there
yeah. Sam, I would rather have them by Skype or by video. As you have these hearings and you have them in the courtroom, part of the way that judges make their determination is try to determine the credibility of witnesses. And it makes it a lot easier when you can see the individual either by Skype or by video, because basically, you can have somebody on the telephone and, it's hard to judge what their character is at that moment and to be able to watch them and observe them. And so that's one reason that I would lots rather doing by Skype or video than telephone. If telephone is our only access, then we have to use that. But that would be my least preferred.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Scudiere, what about you?
Well, to be blunt, I really don't care. Either way is fine with me. The only thing that I ask is that it be set up ahead of time so that we know literally whether to answer the phone or to look at the video screen. So I have no preference. Doesn't matter to me.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Judge Matish, what about for your courtroom?
Well, the Zoom has the security issues, I've been told, so definitely stay away from using it. Skype for Business has been provided to us by the Supreme Court. It seems to work well, with the exception that when you have 10 to 15 people that are in a hearing, and this typically is in abuse and neglect cases that you have so many, although you may have 7 or more in a criminal case, you nevertheless have the added responsibility as the judge trying to monitor that situation to make sure that everyone's still in the call, who's in the call, who may not be appearing on the screen, and you have the limited capabilities of Skype in that you're only allowed to see 5 other people plus yourself. Everyone else, until they speak, goes down into a little blue box. And you may tend to forget who those people are. There is a box that you can check on up in the upper left-hand corner that will list all the participants. And that's handy, because then you've got a list that you can kind of go down and it's right there in front of you. It's a little difficult when you're doing these hearings from your chambers as opposed to the courtroom, although I understand that's going to be changing, and that there's going to be other equipment that's going to be provided to the judges so that we'll be able to do those hearings from the courtroom shortly. So that will probably add a little bit more professional appearance and more of a feel that you're actually in the courtroom when the hearing is being conducted. But you know, there are certain things it's easier to do on the telephone than go through and have the Skype hearing set up.
Okay, thank you, Judge. I got a private message from Mr. Mellis. He mentioned to me that the court doesn't allow Zoom for hearings. And I guess the Skype for Business, I think the Bar Blast has some training information on that if anyone is interested.
Yeah, that's right.
The court is doing some trainings for attorneys who just to get a feel for how to use Skype for Business for hearings. It's my understanding that the court is okay with Zoom, but not for hearings, just because of an encryption issue with Zoom. So for this particular scenario, it was okay since it's a public type of thing, but the Zoom they're not wanting people to use for actual hearings.
If an elderly judge can learn how to use Skype, anyone can.
There you go.
I think we have time for one more question and then maybe some final remarks. So I'm just going to ask this last question. Let's start with Judge Scudiere. What are the plans in your circuit for working around call dockets, either in the circuit courts or the magistrate courts?
Yeah, we've just actually started talking about that, because our next normal docket call would be when we're set to do, my court is set to do arraignments in June. So we've been talking about that, and our plan right now, and boy, that could change, it could really change, but our plan right now is to do, to set 3 of those every 15 minutes. And that way we would have maybe around 10 people in our courtroom with designations about where they could sit on the benches. So call dockets are probably out the window for the foreseeable future as far as the cattle calls that everybody is used to.
Thank you. Judge Matish?
We have made the decision a long time ago to not do call dockets in this circuit. And the only time that it potentially becomes an issue is after the grand jury returns their indictments and we have arraignment days, because one judge does each term of court. And normally we've set those at about 5-minute intervals. Several years ago, I started doing those through the video conferencing equipment at the regional jails. And it's a lot easier. It's a lot safer for the facilities, because they'll have the inmates lined up basically in the hallway, and you get done with one, you do the other. That's probably going to be a problem with social distancing that's going to have to be looked at, and maybe go to a 15-minute schedule like what Judge Scudiere has said. With respect to bringing in jurors for jury orientation, we're told that we're not supposed to be bringing large groups of people in. We do not have a courtroom that's large enough to bring in the 75 to 100 jurors that we bring in every 4 weeks in our circuit. We do have a jury panel that's scheduled to come in on the 29th. And the plan right now at this point in time is to bring those in groups of about 25 to 30, use one of the larger courtrooms, and do 3 separate orientations at that time.
Thank you. Judge Shaffer?
Yeah, we don't do any call dockets or cattle calls. The only time we do, or like the other circuits, is with arraignments. We have a grand jury set up for June 23rd. What we're going to be doing on that is the grand jury will be meeting in the courtroom itself. They will be spread out, maintain their social distancing in there, and then we will have arraignments on the 30th. And what we're planning on doing is any incarcerated defendant, we will be scheduling them with Tiger Regional Jail and be doing them again by, video. Other individuals, we will schedule them out. If it takes us 2 days to do arraignments, then that's what we'll do. We submitted a plan early on, I think it was probably in March, because I had a 3-term trial coming up, that we were actually wanting to use the Civic Center here in Kingwood to select a jury. What our plans was to bring the jury pool down there, and we would use both the bleachers on one side for them to sit. We would then, as they were called, we'd have them on the other side. There would be seats designated for each member. Once a jury would be impaneled, then we would come back up to the courthouse to hold the trial. And basically the jury would take one side of the benches, and we have them numbered where they would have to maintain their social distancing. The other side of the courtroom would be used for the public. And we would keep a bailiff stationed in between the jury and the public at all times. As far as petit jury orientation, what we've looked at is we're probably going to end up with somewhere between 90 and maybe 120 petit jurors. And so what we're looking at is breaking that up into at least 4 to 5 different orientation pools. The first one being 9 o'clock a.m., 11 o'clock a.m., 1 o'clock p.m., and 3 o'clock. And then if we need to go into the second day, we would do that. What we are doing with our grand jurors that will be coming into the courthouse on June 23rd, they will actually be entering through the side door, not through the main door of the courthouse, but they will be entering in through the door next to the sheriff's department. There will be the social distancing marks on the sidewalk and the steps for them. We are bringing them in at least 3 to 4 different time periods, I believe starting at 8, might be 8:15, 8:30, 8:45, and 9 o'clock. That is to ensure that we're only bringing in 8 or 9 people at a time, and that way we can maintain social distancing the entire way.
Thank you, Judge Shaffer. And I know that we're out of time, so I just want to briefly thank each of you, Judge Matish, Judge Scudiere, Judge Shaffer, for taking the time to do this with us. I personally have a number of other questions that I know we can't get to. I'm sure that Sam has received dozens of questions. So I'm going to ask that you each just very briefly maybe give us some final remarks. And within those remarks, tell us the best way to communicate with you or your office in the future to perhaps ask those questions that we couldn't get to today. Judge Matish?
Well, I'm going to say something I never thought I'd ever say. Send me an email. The email is very, very simple. Any judges is their first name dot last name at courtswv.gov. So it's out there. If you need something, that's probably the quickest and easiest way to get in touch with me. If you see me on the street, I'll be the one wearing the mask, okay? Because I'm elderly. May even have on the gloves. We'll have the gloves for you if you need them. We even have these nice handy wipes that the Supreme Court's purchased for us to be able to, they don't smell like the ones that you get at the Kentucky Fried Chicken, but we'll give those to you if you need them when you're coming into the courthouse. So I'll see you all virtually.
Shannon, and this is Anita, let me interrupt before you finish with the other 2 judges. On the State Bar website, if you go to For the Public and Courthouses and click on just below the photo of the courthouse you are interested in, you go directly to the Supreme Court's website, and that website will provide you with the names and contact information for each judge and judicial representative in that particular county. So if you have questions about how a particular county is handling something, you can go there for an easy reference.
Thank you, Judge Matish. And just before we move on to Judge Shaffer, I just want to point out someone mentioned in the chat that Judge Matish, you are not elderly, you are seasoned.
Thank you.
So Judge Shaffer.
Yes, Shannon, first thing I'd like to do, I'd like to thank you, Miss Casey, Miss Haddad, Mr. Hess for doing this. I think that it is something that is needed. I think it's something that probably the State Bar ought to think about maybe doing quarterly. And, you know, the more communication we have is the better off we're all going to be. You know, the best way to get in touch with me, and I wish I was like Judge Matish, you know, send me an email. If you do, it might be a while before I get back with you. And so what I'm going to tell anybody is, you know, anyone that practices up here knows my law clerk, Allison, and they also know my assistant, Kayla. And I tell you what, I am very blessed to have those two with me. That comes to technology, they're in here helping me out all the time. If you send them an email, I'll guarantee you will get a response back a heck of a lot quicker than if they send me an email. So, but basically, I think all the attorneys that practice up here knows that I'm usually in the office by 6:30, 6:45 of mornings. If the phone rings here, I answer it prior to anyone else getting here. If they have a question, I can answer it there. But the best way is either to get in touch with Allison or with Kayla. So once again, thank the State Bar and all of you that participated.
Thank you, Judge Shaffer. And certainly not least, but finally we have Judge Scudiere.
Well, everybody who deals with us knows that you call Robin and call her or email her, and she will get you an answer. And I also would like to thank the bar for your hospitality today. These were good questions. I think that they were what we needed, which is to have a conversation. And I agree with Judge Shaffer that we need to continue this. And because our courts need to be accessible to everybody, and everybody needs to know what's going on. So thank you so much, State Bar, for hosting us today.
And thank you all, and especially thank you to Sam Hess, who has been doing the very challenging work of fielding the numerous questions and trying to compile them for us. So thank you to everyone, and thank you to Anita and to Monica.
Shannon, before everyone leaves, let me advise those who are on today that this session has been recorded. My IT director will send the recording to the three judges probably in less than a day. He's very, very efficient. After they have had an opportunity to review it, probably by no later than the end of next week, it will be posted on the website and available to anyone who didn't participate. If you know someone who was not able to participate today, who does practice in any of these counties, please recommend that they view this. I want to reiterate the thanks to everyone who was involved. I do want to tell you that we will have 3 more webinars, June 2, 4, and 12. And I apologize, I looked it up, did not know, I'm in Judge Matish's age group, had drawn a complete blank on our 3rd judge for the 12th, which is Judge Lynn Nelson. So to everyone, look for the email. Thank you very much to everyone, and we will see many of you again on June 2.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.